Welcome back to another episode of Journey, a MedPro podcast. We're so excited to have you guys join us today. I'm your host, Vanessa, and I'm here with Michael. So Michael is and one of our employees here at MedPro. He has been with us for a little over 2 years and currently serves as our financial relationship manager, where he works very closely with a lot of our international healthcare professionals to help them assimilate to life in the U.S., the culture in the U.S., specifically also around financial wellness, financial planning. And your background, you've been in finance for 10 years now, started in banking as a financial consultant, so that you helped your clients with various goals, whether it was to start a business, buy their first home, consolidate their debt, and you grew in that role to become a branch operations manager, which is very exciting, where you got to continue to help your team do that and continue to grow that. But yeah, now you're here, and we're really excited to have you here and share with us a little bit about what financial wellness means and how we can achieve that as individuals in our lives. So is there anything else that you would like to add and share with our listeners?
Well, I'm very excited to be here, right? Of course, coming from a different part of finance to working here in healthcare is different. However, the goal is the same, right? The goal is to, like you mentioned, have improve financial well-being. Right, to be comfortable in your setting and ensure that you can do the things that you love to do, right? So no matter where you're at, whether it's healthcare, whether you are a mechanic, a teacher, airline pilot, finances are always going to be there, and financial well-being should always be one of your top priorities. Yeah.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I'm selfishly really excited for you to be here because, I've attended a few of your webinars, and you always have so much great knowledge to share and tools and tricks on how to achieve those goals, whether it's home buying, getting out of debt, building your savings, and we'll talk about a good chunk of that today. So I want to start with just budgeting basics 101, right? I think where everyone kind of needs to start, because that ultimately helps you build savings and all of that. So what are some tools that you would recommend people use, or some tricks, tips, how you can get started on just creating a basic budget for yourself?
Course. So of course there's a lot of tools out there that most people might not even know are there, right? The one I simply like to use is an Excel spreadsheet, right? There's a lot of templates out there on Excel. I know I'm not an expert on Excel. I'm terrible at Excel. But when I find a template, right, and I can use it to track my income, my expenses, my savings, right, that gives me a better visual of what's coming in, what's going out, right? And it helps me maintain consistency. But there's a lot of apps out there, especially, of course, in the digital age now, right? Everybody has their mobile banking app on their phone, right? A lot of mobile banking apps have categorized what you spend money on. You can set up alerts, right? You can see how many times I went out to eat this month, or how much am I spending on a haircut, or it just categorizes it in so many different ways. So you get a better idea on what you're spending on and what you need to cut back on. But me, myself, personally, once again, I want to say not old fashioned, but I like to keep things in track manually, right? Just to ensure that, hey, this is what's coming in, what's going out. But then there's those who are okay with digital apps, which is totally fine. Sure. At the end of the day, it's just important to keep track of what's coming in, what's going out, how much you're savings. That way you ensure you're living within your means and not overspending. So
yeah, I would imagine that manual keeping track of things just helps you be a little bit more conscious of where it goes, right? I am always in Target, and I'll go in telling myself, okay, my budget is $50, and that's never what I leave spending. So, but to your point, maybe going back and looking at, okay, this is what I spent, and even maybe putting in like, this was what I intended to spend, that puts it right in front of your face, right? To look at and see, well, what do I need to cut back on, right? Where can I save some money?
Of course, there's even pushing it way back to right to when we use cash. Now everybody's
Yeah.
using
What is
debit card,
cash?
credit card, right? There's even the envelope system, right? I know
I've
many
heard of
people, yeah, don't go back to it because who uses cash now.
Yeah.
But even using the envelope system, categorizing, oh, I'm gonna go to Target. This is how much I'm gonna spend this month. So you put that amount of cash in that envelope, right? Or this is what I'm gonna spend for restaurants this month, or going out, having fun. So the envelope system is also another good alternative for those who want to go back to the actual basics of using cash.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, sometimes it's easy to just swipe your card and
Oh,
not
yeah.
know how much you spent.
If you're even swiping, maybe you're just tapping your phone.
Or now you go, now it's tapping your phone. It's not
Yeah.
even swiping.
Yeah. So kind of going back to Excel, right? Because Excel can be really overwhelming. Full transparency, my mother is a finance guru. She does so much of her budgeting in Excel, and she's probably made me like 2 or 3 templates, but I get overwhelmed. I'm like, there's so many formulas. I don't know. There's 15 different color codes. And for some people, I'm sure that really works, but some people might need something that's a little more basic of income, outcome, recurring expenses, you name it, right? So where would you recommend people go for templates, and like where's a good starting point with that?
Good question. So there's right off of Excel, sometimes when you open up Excel, it gives you like an option of different templates. I just go in there and type the keyword budget, and it shows a lot of different templates, right? I am a color coded type of person, right? So I like to see colors. I like to see, okay, green is good, red is bad, right? So that's normally what I look for. I look for colorful templates directly through Excel, or even I think it's Microsoft Office or Office.com. They
Oh,
have
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of different templates. Just type in budget. You can even my preference is Excel, even though I'm not an expert, but there's even Word templates, there's PowerPoint, so there templates for all Microsoft Office platform. But just type in budget and see which one is more user friendly for you,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, it's gonna all come down to what you bring in, what goes out, what you save, is whatever you feel more, comfortable
Yeah.
using.
So, and I'm gonna get the ratio way wrong, but there is this ratio that kind of floats around, and this is how much you put towards your expenses, and this is how much you put aside from emergencies, or this goes into savings. And I know it's not 80/20, but that's what my head wants to say, right? But is there kind of a standard rule or a base rule that people might want to go for to help them get started?
Yes. So there is it's the 30/60.
Was way off.
I think it's 36. Is it 30/60? I could be wrong, right? Because I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't go off that system, but there is a percentage, and I'm not saying it's 30, 60, and 10%, right? If I'm not mistaken, the 30% should be used for your believe it's housing. Could be wrong, right? Once again, I don't tailor it usually to that budgeting.
Yeah.
60% should be used for your necessary expenses, and 10% for your savings.
Okay.
Once again, I gotta double check that,
Yeah.
right? But there is I think it's 30, 60, 10, or it could be a different combination of those, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure that changes if you look at it, right? I mean, housing now in terms of cost versus whether it's rent or mortgage, right, is very different from what it probably was when whoever came up with that ratio came up with it. So I imagine that probably needs some adjustment based on where you live, probably.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, cost of living has increased for so many individuals, right? And the diverse group that I speak to, some of them are putting away even, like I said, 60%, even though that's not the recommended amount, right?
Yeah.
60% away of their savings. But then there's those who can't even put 5% away in their savings, right? So of course that's adjusted based on each individual, based on their income, based on their expenses. But at the end of the day, my recommendation is stick to a plan, right? Whether it's a percentage, whether it's a fixed amount, right? That way you can stay a little bit more consistent, or even set up a goal, right? SMART goals. I'm not sure if you've heard of SMART goals,
Yeah.
right? So be specific, something specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sticking to those that going by that, right, is going to help you maintain consistency and meet your goals.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. I think, there are moments where we feel very, I know for myself, like I feel very motivated. I'm going to get all of these savings in or I'm going to pay off all my credit cards by, 6 months from now. And then 6 months from now, and I've got one paid off, or maybe not even fully one, right? So then it's like, oh man, I didn't reach my goal, and you feel all the more disappointed. Whereas if you kind of sit down and look at everything and really figure out, okay, is this achievable? Is it something that I can really get done by this time frame? Then you're setting yourself up for more success and keep getting motivated to do those things. So I think SMART goals is an excellent idea to help you get started with that. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So kind of recapping, just so we have a starting point from a budgeting basics perspective. I mean, so from it sounds like, first of all, figure out which tool is going to help you. What's going to work best for you? Is it Excel? Is it Word? Is it a template? Is it a notebook that you're keeping track of everything? And then kind of looking at what is my income? What does that break down to? What are my fixed expenses, whether that's rent or mortgage, utilities, right? And then kind of tallying and tracking where am I spending my money? And from there figuring, kind of working backwards essentially, right?
Mhm.
Of, okay, where can I build up more savings? What does my budget look like? Where do I need to cut back? Would you agree that's a good starting point, or anything I
Yeah.
missed that you want to add?
No, absolutely. Right? Because there's sometimes like necessary expenses. You may think like, oh, my subscription services, right? But those are discretionary expenses, right? Oh, my Amazon shopping, right?
Sure, yeah.
Right. These are, if you're really, of course, trying to improve your financial well-being, cutting back on discretionary expenses is advisable. Doesn't mean you have to eliminate them, right? Because
Sure, yeah.
you still want to have fun. You don't want to cut back on everything. Now you don't have any Netflix now or cable, and now you're just at home, shopping on Amazon now because you're bored, right? So, cutting back, but of course not having to eliminate things helps out. But yeah, it just gives you a better idea of what's really needed and what's not.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. To your point, right? The amount of streaming services we probably each have. I mean, Disney, Netflix, Hulu, HBO. Like maybe one can go. Maybe.
Sorry, I think cable wasn't bad.
Right? Now it's like we're gonna go back to cable soon. But yeah, so kind of continuing down this path of budgeting, right? Another really important piece that I know people are working on is, how do I keep building up my savings, or how do I start building up my savings? And so I really want to hear from you. What are some recommendations you have on people to build up their savings? What's the high yield savings account are a really big topic right now. A lot of banks are really upping that percentage, some are not. Is it better to put some money into a CD and see what happens there? Like, what is the best way to boost your savings and maybe do it quickly or more efficiently?
Of course. Yeah, right now, of course, savings for me, I've gotten a lot of this topic from some of my explorers, right? Like, oh, I want to save, right? Tax season is coming up. If I get a return, I don't know what to do with it, right?
Oh my gosh,
So,
yeah.
right? Oh my God, I spent all my savings during the holidays. Now I had to, get back and recoup what I spent. So yeah, savings is a big topic. Of course, it all ties back down to budgeting. You want to make sure you have a budget first, right? Because if you don't have a budget, then you don't know how much you can save, and now you're dipping into your savings to pay for
Cover
your
your
expenses,
budget,
right?
yeah.
But besides that, right, once you've already figured that piece out, there's a lot of great products out there, like you mentioned. Right now, interest rates have significantly increased, right, as we've seen for lending, right? So for deposit accounts as well, right? There is the high yield savings accounts, money market accounts, right? Right now, what I've seen when I've been speaking with explorers is a lot of the online banks like Ally Bank, Discover Bank, Goldman Sachs, Marcus by Goldman Sachs, right? Those usually have the highest annual percentage yields,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're going to see them in the mid fours, some of them even as close to 5%, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I would recommend someone who just right now is using a regular savings account, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's like, I'm earning 0.001, 0.005, maybe even 1%, right? Take the chance and go for an online bank. They're still secure, all right, as long as they're reputable banks, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not peer-to-peer sharing, right? As long as they're reputable banks, FDIC insured, right, or NCUA if it's a credit union,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be fine, right? I know a lot of people have told me they're skeptical, oh, but how do I access my money, right? But well, then this day and age, everything, a lot of things is electronic, right?
I will say those people that are thinking about that, hats off, because that thought didn't even cross my mind once. I'm like, oh, this looks great. Let me
Right?
put my savings into it. So I didn't even think about that. Makes me feel better about my choice, though.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, the last time I walked into a bank, right? I want to say it's probably almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last time I walked into a bank was it was actually, I had to do a wire transfer on a closing, but I couldn't do that online.
Yeah.
Other than that, everything I do on my
Is online
app,
banking.
my phone. So,
Yeah.
those who are worried about, oh, it's an online bank, I don't have access to my money. Everything's electronic now. So,
That's true.
but yeah, high yield savings are a great way, especially if you need relatively quick access to your money,
Mm-hmm.
right? The only downside I would say with a high yield savings is it is a variable rate, right? So of course the rate can go up or down. I mean, if it goes up, even better, right? But it could go down. It's not fixed rate. But that's the only negative, or not negative, con I can think of, right?
Right.
The other great option, like you mentioned, is CDs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Certificate of deposits or time accounts known in some other places, right? Those are also another great way for you to put money away and just forget it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to a savings account, you have access to it at all times. A CD is more for a specific term.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They have 3-month CDs, 6-month CDs, 12-month CDs. They even have, like, I've seen 36 months, 48-month CDs, right?
Oh, wow.
Which is a long time,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's still a good product, especially if you're like, okay, I don't need the money right now, because you're guaranteed a good interest rate,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're guaranteed the interest rate for the term of the CD. So you don't have to worry about the rate going down.
Right.
The downfall I would see to that, right, is if you need the money, then you're going to be penalized the interest you earn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's harder to access it. So if you're wanting to go that route, you kind of want to make sure, okay, I'm good. I can put this away. I won't need it. I can commit to this. Whereas if you go with a high yield savings account, at least worst case scenario, you can access it a lot more quicker and without being penalized.
Yeah. I would say that's the only drawback, the
Yeah.
penalty. But I mean, luckily you're never penalized your principal amount. You're
Yeah, right.
penalized interest, which kind of like it's the whole reason you wanted to get the CD, right? So yeah, those are really great products to think about if you're really looking to earn more money off of interest.
Yeah, I know that some banks, when you're setting, like if you have direct deposit, you can set up rules essentially to say like this fixed amount I want to go into my savings, and it'll tell you why. What goal do you have? What do you want to call it? I'm not saying everyone is like that, but I know mine is, where I can set it up that way, and that was really helpful at one point because I didn't have to think about transferring my savings. It would just do it automatically, which was nice. Because then whatever came into my account, that's kind of what I then started treating as my income, right? Versus income minus savings. So I think that's another really great tool, depending on where you're at with that. But yeah, so you heard it. Check out online banking or online banks, high yield savings accounts.
Yeah.
All right, and that brings us right into the next thing, and you actually talked about it in terms of closing, right? Home buying is, I feel like, always a hot topic, and sometimes it's because we're so excited about the rates, and sometimes we're very not excited about the rates. But nevertheless, a lot of people that want to get started in that. Obviously, you have the savings piece, but how do you go about home buying, the different lenders, deciding where where do you start? Because it's a big undertaking from not just from choosing a house, but from the financial standpoint.
People think about buying a house are like, oh my God, it's going to take forever, right? It's a long process. Honestly, it is, right? But it's a rewarding process.
Right.
Right? Very, very much rewarding. So it is definitely worth every single thing that you have to do to get there, right? I mean, when it comes to purchasing a house, there's a lot of things you want to take into consideration. And the things that I always tell people is, in no particular order, right? You want to make sure that you have good credit, good income, right? Savings and low debt, right? Because with that, it's gonna be easier for lenders to see that you're doing well financially,
Sure. Yeah.
right? And I know right now there's been a lot of talk about, you know, the interest rates being high, but what I tell people who are on the sidelines of getting a home is date the rate, marry the home, right? Because yes, we all get scared that interest rates are very high, right? But in reality, there's a lot of people in the sidelines right now looking to buy a home, right? And when rates come right back down, then everybody's gonna go jumping and buying their homes. You're gonna probably see bidding wars starting again, right? So it's gonna be very, you know, back to, I'm not gonna say it's gonna go back to like what it was in 2021 or 2020, right? But prices are probably gonna go back up, right? As opposed to if you already get a home and you're happy with it, you know, you're still going to be able to refinance later on, right? Whether you refinance in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? At the end of you're still gaining equity. So my take is if you can comfortably afford to do so, if you are able to meet the four of the things I told you, right? Good credit, good savings, good income, low debt, by all means, don't let anything else hold you back. People telling you, oh, wait till the interest rates go down. You're going to definitely be fine doing so.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to your point, right? When those interest rates go down, competition's sure to go back up for the same house, right? So then you might head back into the bidding wars and cash only and all of that. So I want to go back to building equity because you mentioned that, right? And kind of have a conversation around that. What does that even mean? What is the benefit? Because some people prefer to rent, right? Oh, it gives me the flexibility. I don't have to renew. If I don't love it, I don't have to stay here. I don't have to fix things, right? I'm not responsible for that. So equity is a big pro to buying a home. So I kind of want to spend some time talking through that and what that means.
Yeah, of course. So, of course, like you mentioned, renting versus buying, you know, renting has its pros too, right? Like I said, you don't like it, you can move. You have an issue, you can definitely call your landlord, have it take care of it, right? You don't have to pay taxes, you don't have to worry about anything else like that, right? So with home buying, right, it may be more expensive to buy in the beginning, but equity is there, meaning equity is going to help with many things in the future, right? Equity just means that you have how do I put this? You have more assets, right? Because a home is considered an asset, right? Renting, you don't have an asset. You're, in a way, you're paying your landlord's rent or mortgage, I should say, right? But with you having equity, that is money that later on you can use for different purposes, right? You can sell your home, maybe your first home. It's not the home you really want, right? Maybe later on you want to build your dream home or buy your dream home, and the equity you have from your home, you can use it towards that. Or some people have sold their home when they retire, right? They paid it off. Maybe they bought their home at $300,000. Now they're retired. Their home is now worth $600,000, right? And now maybe they want to downsize to something smaller and have the rest of the equity to use for other expenses, right? With maybe some people didn't plan properly for retirement, right? But hey, they have their home there to rely on, right? So I think equity is very important, right? And it's huge, right? And we saw it back in from 2020 to now, a lot of people buying their homes, and now the prices skyrocket,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, wow, I bought this home and now I have $200,000 in equity in like 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So we might not see that anymore anytime soon, but equity is very, very important, very good for everyone is financial well-being.
Yeah, it's an investment in your future.
Yeah.
And so thank you for taking some time to talk through that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you actually brought me right to the next topic that you just brought up again. But retirement, right?
Mhm.
Planning for retirement, there's different options out there. How do you pick which one is right for you? Do you only go with something that's through your employer, and 401k versus Roth IRA? And who do I talk to? Where's the best place to go to help me with retirement planning if there isn't someone at my job who can walk me through that? So I kind of want to talk through all of that and see what you have to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually had a lot of people recently come up to me and ask me, should I open up a Roth IRA, right? What are the benefits of this? What are benefits of that, right? 401k IRAs are two completely separate things, right? And some people kind of sometimes get them confused, right?
Sure, I'm one of them.
But if your employer gives you a 401k, right? Like here at Metro, we get 401k, so it's definitely a great advantage, right?
It took me a long time to sign up for it, longer than I'm really embarrassed to admit, but
Absolutely. But 401k is amazing because that is meant to replace your income when you retire, right? And most employers who offer a 401k also give you a match, right? So it's free money that you're losing out on if you don't sign up for a 401k, right? So 401k not only is giving you free money, you can also help reduce your taxable income, right? Some people, there's a lot of people who know that, but there's people who might not have even thought of that, right?
Yeah, I'm that. That's me again.
Right. But yeah, it can help you reduce your taxable income if you have a traditional 401k that reduces your taxable income. You don't have to pay taxes on your contributions until you either retire or withdraw from your plan. Right? For a Roth 401k, right, that's post-tax. So you actually save money when you retire, right? So you pay your full taxes now, but you don't have to worry about any taxes on any gains or distributions when you retire or take it out, right?
Got it.
But me personally, it just, one, it depends on everyone's situation, but me personally, I like to see the benefits now, right? So I would rather, instead of paying full tax on my paycheck, I'd rather take that tax break now because, of course, as you know, the more money we make, the more taxes
You end up paying,
we pay, right? And most people, not all people, but most people, when they retire, usually make less, right? So less you make, the less taxes you pay, right? So that is one way I like to paint that picture to many people too, right? So you can always think of that. So that's the 401k, right? Employer sponsored, you get your match, helps you reduce your taxable income. But then there's IRAs, right? IRAs are individual retirement accounts, right? There's traditional IRAs and there's also Roth IRAs, right?
Oh, they're two different.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much.
So with the IRA, anyone can have an IRA, right? But I like to recommend IRAs to people who are probably either self-employed or people who don't have any retirement benefits at their employer, right? Because that is self-managed, self-administered. You have to go make those contributions yourself. It doesn't come out of your paycheck. You don't get any matches, right? So you lose out on the free money, right? Now, when it comes to, for example, your IRA, one benefit that it may offer some people is it also reduces your taxable income, right? If you go with traditional.
Okay.
So back when my banking days, I would always get a lot of people coming in, opening up a traditional IRA because, oh my God, I owe this much in taxes, right? So in order for them to reduce their taxable income, they just put it in an IRA, and instead of paying the government their higher tax bracket, they would put it in their IRA, and then whenever they went closer to retirement, they would withdraw it at a lower tax rate, right? So
Okay.
it could also be a tax advantage for those who may still have their 401k, right? But now they're like, oh, instead of paying this much in taxes, I can reduce it by putting it into a traditional IRA,
Okay.
right? So it may have benefits for those people as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're both retirement accounts, both meant to help you replace your income for retirement. But me, ultimately, if your employer offers you a 401k, go with your employer.
So if you had access to both, whether it's through your employer or through your employer in a bank or whatever, would you recommend doing both? Or would you say, hey, if you have a 401k, just put more into your 401k? What would be the pros and cons to either option?
I think that I would say keep it in the 401k. Yeah, I would increase my contributions, probably max out what I could through my employer, right? Because, you know, me personally, I'm still like 6 years away from retirement, right? So I'm just trying to do the math in my head, right? It's like 36 years away from retirement. So I still have time, right? I mean, it's never too early to start retirement. I always tell everyone start as soon as possible. I even told my niece who just got her job, right, at 19, like, start your 401k now.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Like, don't wait, because the longer you contribute to your retirement, the better retirement life you're probably going to have.
Yeah. So let's say you start late, right? Maybe you just, in some cases, maybe you just moved to the States, right? Maybe this is your first real exposure to a 401k or an opportunity to invest in one. What would you recommend if you're the person that's saying, worrying, oh my gosh, I started too late. What happens what do I do? How can I make sure that I'm set for retirement? What's a piece of advice you would share with that person, or a strategy to maybe invest?
Of course. So at that point, right, depending on how far you are from retirement, there may be a catch-up period, right, where you may want to focus a little bit more on contributing as much as you can, right? Maxing out, of course, your contributions, and trying to think of maybe aside from your 401k, maybe you can also, even though, like I said, IRAs are not something that I would recommend to most individuals, an IRA may make sense for those who are closer to retirement, because there's IRA savings and IRA brokerage accounts, right? IRA savings, you're guaranteed what you put in, right? IRA brokerage are kind of like your 401k. They're invested for you, right? So as we know with investments, they're volatile, go up and go down, right? So it's always good to also have some sort of guaranteed retirement, right? So depending on your circumstances, maybe having an IRA savings as well, maybe not contributing as much as you would at 401k, but maybe still having an IRA savings where you can still put in some amount monthly, a fixed amount, and see it grow with a guaranteed amount, right? But besides that, I think the 401k is still going to help out in the long run, because it's meant to keep up with inflation, right? It's meant to keep up with the market. And I know I hear people get scared, like, oh, I'm losing so much money, the economy, I'm gonna stop contributing to my 401k, right? I actually work very close with one of financial advisors, my previous employer, right? when COVID happened, I lost so much money in my 401k that I was devastated, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna stop contributing. I don't want to contribute anymore,
Oh, okay.
right? But my financial advisor told me, you know what? This is actually the best time to continue your 401k. And if you can increase your contributions, even better,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that just means that you have more purchasing power, right? That means you're buying more shares at a cheaper price,
Oh, I didn't
right?
think about it like that.
That just means you're buying shares at a cheaper price. So when everything goes back up, maybe you double or triple the amount that you lost,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I tell a lot of people, regardless, I mean, not regardless, because if you're like 2 years away from retirement, it could be devastating for that person, right?
Yeah.
But if you're still, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years away from retirement, you know, don't let that worry
Right.
you, right? Don't let that worry you. But once again, if you're closer to retirement, that's why I would recommend not only your 401k, but some part of an IRA savings to guarantee some of your retirement.
That makes sense. That makes sense. All right. So we've talked about budgeting basics. And I mean, ultimately, all of this goes back up to budgeting, right? Knowing how much you can invest in your 401k or whatever other type of retirement services you might want to utilize. At the end of the day, it all goes back to how much is in your budget that you can then dedicate to, whether it's savings or retirement or, saving to buy a home. And a big part of this too is managing debt. Um, Growing up, I grew up in Germany, and when we moved here, one of the big things my mom had to get used to was, okay, I need to, we need to build a credit score, because in Germany at the time that really wasn't a thing. Credit scores weren't being used for everything, and your credit score, a big chunk of that comes from what does your debt to income ratio look like, or how much debt do you have? How are you managing it? Are you paying it on time, kind of thing? So I do want to spend some time just talking about how do you manage your debt? How do you get out of debt? What are some strategies one can implement? And there are so many different kinds of debt, right? Maybe you have student loan debt. Maybe you've got credit card debt. Maybe part of it is trying to build a credit score, right? So there's so many different ways at this point that you can accumulate. Maybe it's a mortgage, right? So what are some strategies on managing all that?
Of course. So one of the biggest goals for a lot of people is getting out of debt, right? So that is that's a really good accomplishment as well, right? But debt is amongst all of us, whether it's a small credit card bill, right, or a car loan, or like I said, student loans, or all these credit cards that accumulate balances. Debt is debt, right? But what I recommend for someone getting out of debt is to avoid continuing getting into debt, right?
Step one.
Right? Step one is stop getting into debt, right? But for some, it might be difficult, right?
Yeah.
But those looking to get out of debt, may want to go back to the basics, right? Which is budgeting, right? Stop using your credit card for anything, unless of course it's a true emergency.
Sure.
Stop using your credit card. Go back to the basics of cash, right? And then take a holistic view of all of your debts, right? So it can be installment debts, closed-end debts, right? Which is loans. It can be open-end credit, right? Which is credit cards, right? And my recommendation is there's two ways, right? But my recommendation is usually pay off the lowest debt first, right? Because it gives you a sense of satisfaction after you're paying that. Oh, I only owe $300 to my Amazon credit card, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pay it off. Don't use it. There you go. That's a sense of satisfaction, right? If you could afford to pay that $300 to your Amazon credit card, now maybe pay that $300 on top of your minimum payment to your next lowest credit card. So maybe now you owe, like, let's say Costco, right? Maybe now you owe Costco $1,000. So instead, pay $300 that you paid off for Amazon, and then on top of that, pay the minimum payment. Let's say the minimum payment is $50. So pay $350 to finish paying that card off, right? And if you could have put more towards it, right?
Yeah.
And that actually has a term. It's called the snowball method,
Okay.
right? Where you pay the smallest debt first, and it continues going and going until you pay off all your cards.
Yeah.
Right. But my recommendation is first start off with the lowest debt, work your way up. I usually also recommend paying off credit cards first because they usually have the highest interest and it's variable interest and they have no payoff date usually, right? So I always recommend paying off, open-end credit, which is credit cards, and then moving towards loans, right? Closed-end debt, right? Once you finish paying off a loan, it's done, right? When you finish paying off a credit card, you still have access to it.
That makes sense.
Right. But yes, first focus on credit cards, then focus on loans. Usually loans, at least they're guaranteed to be paid off at a certain time, whether it's 3 years, whether it's 30 years, like a mortgage, you're guaranteed to pay it off during that set term. Right. But yeah, starting from the basics and avoid getting into other debt. Right. But there's definitely so many methods out there that you can choose to go from. Yeah, there's just so many different ways to pay off debt.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I like the snowball method. I know you've talked about it before. I think to your point, right, that it's like when you have a to-do list and you cross that item off your to-do list, it does give you that sense of satisfaction, of accomplishment, and it helps renew the motivation to keep going. And it feels more attainable versus maybe, student loans, versus maybe a $10,000, $20,000 student loan. And that does feel much more daunting than maybe that $300, $500 credit card debt that you might be wanting to pay off for that card. So I, speaking of credit cards, I want to talk a little bit about that minimum payment due, right? Because that minimum payment due doesn't really do much aside from keep you in good standing, from what I understand, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not really getting closer to your end goal of paying off that card. Is that accurate-ish?
You are absolutely right. Yeah. So minimum payment is just going to make sure that you're in good standing, right? It's going to keep your credit from going delinquent, your credit card or loan from going delinquent, right? But when you make a minimum payment, a majority of that payment, probably 90% of that payment goes to interest, right? So if you make the minimum payment, it might take you several years to pay down that card. And that's with you never using that card again, right? That's just, to pay off that current balance. But, just circling back to of course, the snowball method, right? It's okay to make the minimum payments temporarily as long as you have a plan that you're going to pay off that debt, right? So, of course, if you can afford to pay the minimum, more than the minimum, even better, right? But once again, focus on that small debt first, even if you have to continue paying your minimum. Don't ever not pay your minimum, right?
Yeah, right.
Don't ever not pay your minimum because, you definitely don't want a delinquency and you don't want a derogatory remark on your credit, right? But once you get there, pay above the minimum.
Yeah.
Right? Try to avoid getting stuck with the mindset, I'm just going to pay my minimum, because you're going to go back to square one.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if you continue using the card.
Right.
Actually, it's going to get
You're not
worse.
getting anywhere, yeah.
Right?
Walking backwards.
Yeah, you're definitely taking one step forward, 2 steps back that way, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely one of the things to avoid, right? So
Yeah. And credit scores, it's years ago, obviously, but I did take a course in college around like financial planning and budgeting, and I don't know why this stuck with me so much, but I want to say such a large percentage of your credit score comes from just good payment history, and then like history period, just the length of time that you've had credit cards or debt or whatever, right? And so much of it comes from just, are you paying on time, right? And so if that's the minimum payment, at least getting that minimum payment so that it doesn't take such a big hit on your credit score, right?
Yeah, so credit is paid off of different factors, right? The most important factor is on-time payments. That makes up, I think it's 35% of your credit, right, is based off on-time payments, right? So whether that's the minimum, whether that's the entire balance, that is what makes up the majority of your credit score.
Yeah.
Right. And if you miss the minimum payment and pay it as soon as you can.
Yeah.
But if 30 days pass, that is a huge red flag to creditors, because now you're reported delinquent, and that usually stays on your credit report for 7 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. So
a huge impact.
Huge impact, right? As terrible as it is to stay stuck on paying the minimum payment, make it if it means not to be reported to a credit bureau, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing, of course, is utilization. I think that makes up 30% of your credit score. The lower utilization you have, the better, right? Because it shows creditors that you're not thirsty for debt, right? You're not thirsty for debt. You're not like, oh my God, I need to spend this, spend that, right?
And utilization is, and correct me if I'm wrong, utilization is looked at across the board. Like if you have 5 credit cards that add up to $5,000, that's probably not an accurate number, but let's say it's $5,000 and you're using $2,000 across those 5, that's the utilization. Or is it per credit card?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, it's yes and no. Yes and no, right? So there's this overall credit that you have based off all credit cards, right? But the rule of thumb is you want to maintain your credit utilization at 30% or less per card.
Across the board.
Across the board.
Each card. Okay.
Right. So as bad as it sounds, right, it's better to have 5 credit cards with a $300 balance than 5 credit cards all paid off with one with $1,000 balance.
Oh.
Right. Because one, it'll show that utilization is low across the board, right? Because it's never good to show one credit card maxed out.
Yeah, okay.
Right. If you can have it leveled out, even better. Of course, you can pay it off even best.
Right.
But if you can have it leveled out, even better, because creditors like to see low balances on their card. Right.
Okay. Yeah. It's really interesting to know, because I definitely knew the first part.
Yeah, but no.
But yes.
The first part is right, because of course, the more credit cards that, let's say, you have no balance on, that also helps with your total utilization. But that one credit card with a maxed out credit line
that
can hurt you a lot too.
That makes sense. Okay. All right. Well, I think we've shared some really, really great tools around budgeting, savings, retirement. And we may have to have you come back for more, because this is such a big topic, right? And it is impacted by so many different factors and variables, and what do you have access to? And so, there may be a part 2 to this, but thank you so much for spending the time here with us today and sharing some of your knowledge and wisdom. I know I learned a lot. I hope that everyone else did too. And yeah, we